we've been chasing in all the electorates we broadcast in. You look at South Australia, Grey and Barker. You look at Mallee in northwestern Victoria. You look at Farrer as well. Labor is not answering calls about who their candidate is. Today is the last day for nominations to run as a candidate. I suspect they'll put nominations in some of those seats. In fact, if you want to have a run, you might want to get your hot shop in order. Download the forwards and look at your citizenship arrangements. There's a whole lot of questions on that form to fill out for that.
Well, on the Flow Morning Show, our look at the federal election, and Rikki Lambert is with me again. And this time we go to the seat of Farrer in New South Wales, currently held by the Liberals' Sussan Ley. And Rikki, she's a strong candidate again for the Liberal Party, albeit the pre-selection for her to be the candidate was a very, very murky process.
Yeah, let's remember Sussan Ley, I think, first won the electorate in 2001. She's been there for 20-odd years as the local member. And there was a push within the Liberal Party to knock her out as the local MP, probably seen as not conservative enough for some voters in the seat of Farrer. And so that seems to have concluded with a court battle. Scott Morrison stepping in and saying he wanted Sussan Ley, who touts herself as one of the senior women in the Liberal government, to get another go around in the seat of Farrer.
Well, it's interesting because last time the election was held in 2019, Sussan won it with 50.7% of the first preference vote. That would indicate that she's a strong chance to be re-elected, given that majority. Last time around, she had a very strong independent, Kevin Mack, and he was campaigning heavily on the water issues of the Murray. He only got 20% of the vote, and it was ALP with 14%. ALP's taken a long time to name their candidate for this particular election.
Yeah, at the Flow News Desk, we've been chasing in all the electorates we broadcast in. You look at South Australia, Grey and Barker. You look at Mallee in northwestern Victoria. You look at Farrer as well. Labor is not answering calls about who their candidate is. Today is the last day for nominations to run as a candidate. I suspect they'll put nominations in some of those seats. In fact, if you want to have a run, you might want to get your hot shop in order. Download the forwards and look at your citizenship arrangements. There's a whole lot of questions on that form to fill out for that. But at the moment, it doesn't look like Labor putting in a strong effort, but it's rumoured that one of the Albury councillors, a Labor councillor in Darren Cameron, could be the person who runs for Labor, which would make sense because on a two-party preferred, there is a stronger vote for Labor down in that southeastern part of the electorate.
Okay, well, we've spoken to Sussan Ley here on Flow News 24, and the article is up there for you to see, and also the podcast with Sussan. Some of what she had to say, 3 issues that Sussan thinks that are important in the seat of Farrer. I was quite intrigued that the first one was mobile phones, which I think everyone would acknowledge that the Coalition's done a pretty good job at filling black spots with its $1 billion of mobile phone spending. But Sussan Ley says there's going to be more for Farrer.
Yeah, whichever Coalition MP we interview across our broadcast seats, they're not triumphal about mobile phone black spots being filled. They know there's a lot more work to be done, and there certainly is. You just can't sensibly campaign in these seats without talking about mobile black spots. But she also talks about regional health, which was a bit of a handball across to the state government, saying it's really their problem, which is odd, saying that's one of her priority issues. You'll hear that in the full interview on the Flow News 24 podcast. But the one that fascinates us is the Murray-Darling Basin Plan. The extra 450 gigalitres Labor is swearing it's going to deliver to South Australia. Peter Malinauskas, Labor Premier, this morning, again on social media saying it will happen. Sussan Ley not so convinced, according to these comments she gave us.
The 450 gig promise under Labor is simply a buyback because it can't be done any other way, and they effectively are turning their back on every single farmer in the basin. We, as a coalition, understand the 450 gigs, but we've got tight controls around it, which mean it has to be socially and economically acceptable to individuals and to communities, and it can't take them backwards. And that's so different from Labor's buyback policy.
So the social and economic issues are what she's talking there, that they can't disadvantage. We know that of this 450 gigalitres, that about 3 has currently been saved in this plan, which has been going for some years now, where in the latter part of it, 2024 is the final stage. So, Rikki, how are we going to find something like 447 gigalitres if we don't buy back some of it, or if we don't modify the plan and go back to the drawing board and say that we simply can't find that 450 gig?
Well, there's actually not that much difference between the two policy positions, much as Sussan Ley tries to paint it as different policy positions. The reality is the way things are going, buyback will be the only way that they can achieve those kinds of savings. Let's not forget Labor Minister Penny Wong, when she was in government as the Water Minister, made some iconic buybacks such as Twynham Agricultural Company and Torrally Station in northern New South Wales. That was a big jump in the direction. They saved hundreds of gigalitres through those purchases. That'll be the direction Labor will certainly take. But the problem is, and I raised this with Susan, you'll hear it in the full interview on the podcast, the New South Wales government has been quite slow in delivering its water-saving projects. Menindee Lakes, they had to go back to the drawing board and try something else. If they don't get there by 2024, they're at the mercy of a Senate, because they'll have to amend the Basin Plan to not go down a buybacks path. But you've got Labor, the Greens and Independents, which is why a lot of commentary and regional seats on the Basin are about the risk of Labor, Greens and the Independents, is that they might have no choice, no matter who is in government, but to use buybacks.
All right, it's a very interesting position because we don't have any more policy for dams to be built in the south of the country, the Murray-Darling Basin catchment area, to help us get to that 450 extra gigs that we do need for the environment. But we are putting in $5 billion into the northern part of the country for irrigation in that part. So the coalition may be pivoting in a different direction away from the 450 gigs, but we'll wait and see. It's a good commentary, and the seat of Farrer is going to be a very interesting one. We'll bring you a little bit more update once we do know more of the candidates in that particular seat.